Of course, as I said, that was the first bite that I got on aviation, and boy, I'm telling you, we really wanted to go that route. And that entered into the school decision also. As my father said to me, if you continue on through high school, I'll see that you get to an aviation school, and we'll help you out there and see what we can do. So that was sort of a bargain that was in the background all the time. And we did continue on into high school and enjoyed the 4 years very much. As I mentioned before, George helped us out immensely to get started. And we took the college course in high school. I took first and second year algebra, and I took let me see, I took trigonometry and solid geometry and plane geometry. We had Mr. Lambert. I was very fortunate in having good teachers. He was the principal, Mr. Lambert was, and he taught the math, and it was excellent. Then I, of course, got interested. I tried to get into the Army Air Force. They didn't have the Air Force. The Army had a branch of the aviation then, but of course they had to have 1 or 2 years of college would be much better if you could get into that. And I didn't have that, so I became quite interested in going on to college, and I had taken 1 year of French, but that was never one of my strong subjects, and neither was English, nor ancient history either. But anyway, we wrote to the University of Maine, and they said that they would accept me at the University of Maine if I had 1 year of passing French, and I could make up the other year at the college. Well, Mrs. Briggs was our French teacher in school, and the poor old soul, by golly, she helped me and did what she could, and I had to take a test, of course, separate of what the class took. When I took one of the class, I don't think I would have got by, but she pushed me by. I would say with a little C, as she used to say, there was a bar over the C, and she says, you're just hanging on with that bar. But anyway, I got accepted at the University of Maine. I did try to get into Bowdoin College. That's where George graduated from, but the marks weren't up to par, and I couldn't get accepted there. As a matter of fact, George and I drove down in his old 1924 Buick and looked the college over and to see what we could do and so forth. And he had made a kind of ahead of his time. He'd taken the front seat of his car and cut the back of it off so that it could be laid back into the back seat. He had some rods there that would connect it up and let it stay back, and you could make a bed out of that. So he and I slept there on the campus of Bowdoin College for a night or two anyway in that car, and then we drove back to Holton. I think, you know, on a drive like that, it was a long haul. But anyway, I'll get back to that later. Now I'll go back a little bit into the high school days and so forth. We had graduated from the old Oakland automobile into an Essex. I think it was a 1927 Essex was the first one. It was all closed in, glass doors and all that sort of thing. By George, we thought that was a great car. It was. It wasn't bad at all. And we used to drive that a little bit and ask Father for it while we was going through high school, you know. We could use it a night or two or whatever if there was a dance or a game and so forth. During the summertime, of course, we used to take it once in a while. While we were in high school, we had great basketball teams. And Holton High was, a good many times, was a champion of Aroostook County, and also tried for the championship of the state of Maine. There was great rivalry between Presque Isle and Holton. And each time those teams would play, they would have a special train made up of about 8 or 9 cars. And that would be sitting at the station, and we'd all go over there to the station and board that train. And it took about an hour ride, nonstop, to get up to Presque Isle. And we'd all, this of course was in the wintertime, And we'd all get off the train and go into the high school there where the game was, see the game, and then come back and get on the train and ride home. And of course we had all kinds of conversation, as you know what kids would have in high school, going back and forth among the cars and talking with your peers and so forth. But that used to be some of the highlights there. And occasionally we went to Bangor on one occasion. We went down there by train. Well, that was quite a ride down there. And also, after we bought this 1927 Essex, Trent Curry was a salesman to the motor company over there by the B&A, and their cars, new cars, used to come to Bangor by train now. They didn't have any automobiles to carry the car. And they'd unload them in Bangor, and they'd have to have somebody drive them from Bangor up to Holton. And I got a job doing that on several different occasions. Myself and 2 or 3 of the other boys, we'd get down with Trent and have a big feed down in the restaurant there. And I always used to get Cape scallops, and they were just as sweet as could be. They were the most delicious things that you ever tasted. I've had them once or twice since then when we lived in Winchester. But, and that meal was 60 cents. And it was darned expensive, I'm telling you. 60 cents then would be about like, well, $6 or $7 now, or $8, somewhere along in there in the same relationship. But it took us almost 6 hours to drive a car from Holton to Bangor at that time. It was 120 miles, and the roads were not paved. they were gravel and ruts and bumps and everything else. And of course the cars, they didn't want to drive them over 25, 30 miles an hour at that time until they got 500 miles on them, I think. And we enjoyed that sort of thing. But most of my enjoyment in the summertime, of course, each summer I worked for the Holton Water Company, and I became a lineman, and I enjoyed that very much and had a lot of experiences hanging transformers and stringing wires out through the country, and working with the boys and on the truck and digging post holes. I learned how to handle a shovel and spoons and bars, and also the ladders and whatnot, because we redid the whole town, took down all the poles in town and put up new ones. The old ones was getting rotted, and the square had telephone poles in it at that time. We took all those down and run the wires around behind the blocks and so forth, and I was in my glory when I was on top of the town blocks there, where I could look over the street and throw a spitball down on somebody that's walking down there that I knew, you know, and then jump back in off the so he couldn't see me. We had a great time anyway. We used to get up lots of times at 3 o'clock in the morning when there was no traffic to work on those poles down there and take them down. So we enjoyed that very much. And let me see now. In the winter time, I used to do a lot of skating. We had a skating rink. At that time, the town built a skating rink, and it was up on Pleasant Street. And I used to go up there after supper, probably when I was a sophomore and a junior, right in there, those 2 years, 2 or 3 years there, and skate from 7 o'clock until 9 in the evening. Sometimes it'd be down to 0, and there would only be 10 or 12 people up there skating. But we always enjoyed it, and I really got hurt up there in one sense. There was a fellow that was playing hockey by the name of Hyatt. I forget his first name. But I was watching him, standing leaning on a hockey stick that I had, and he was down at the end of the rink, or midway of the rink, and he scaled that puck. And that darn thing come right up and struck me right in the mouth. Well, say, I'm telling you, I hit the ice, and my mouth swelled up there as big as your arm, and bled and so forth. And I took off my skates and hobbled home, and pretty well puffed up. Well, in a few more months, that tooth right in my front of my mouth turned all yellow. It broke the nerve, killed the nerve in it, and it looked like the dickens. I had white teeth except one yellow one right in the middle of it. So I went to the dentist, Dr. Monahan, And he took and cut that tooth off, sawed it off right close to the gum, and drilled up into the root and put a steel peg up there. And then he drilled onto he got a tooth and drilled down into that false tooth, of course, and he put that tooth on, and I got it in my mouth today. And that was back, I would say, in about 1927 or 28, and that would be about 55 years ago, and I still got that tooth, and he did a great job. But that was kind of in the winter time, and then we used to play a lot of pool rooms. We had, let me see, there was 4 pool rooms in Holton at that time, and 3 bowling alleys. And we used to do a little bowling and shoot pool, and we could, it was 10 cents a game and 3 games for a quarter. And occasionally we'd go to the movies, and the talkies come in about that time too. Yeah, that's what we call the talking moving pictures. And it was quite a thrill. Why, well, the first time Holton had a talkie movie, the line stretched from the Temple Theater clear down around the corner of the bank and up toward where the convent was there. You had to stand in line, and the place was packed. You couldn't get in there. And I think it was 30 cents it cost us to get in there. So we took those things in and saw them come in anyway. Now, a little before that time, I don't know just about when that would be. I would say it was probably when I was in the 7th or 8th grades. I didn't care for a lot of the fellows that was going to the First Baptist Church. That's where my father and mother went. And I decided to make a little move and talked it over with my folks, and they were very broad-minded and willing, and I went up to the Free Baptist Church, the Military Street Baptist Church. So I kind of left the church that my father and mother attended, and the whole family in the past, and I went up to the Free Baptist Church where I had a lot of friends. All the boys up around where we lived, the Robertses and the Hawkinses and Wilsons and so forth, they all went there, and I joined the Scouts and had a good time a meeting there. And I met a girl there, named Thelma Bamford. I wanted to kind of have a little date with her. You know, we used to have socials and in the church, of course, and on Friday evenings. And I was able to walk home with her there once and asked her if she'd like to go to the movies, and she allowed what she would like to do that next Friday night. So by golly, next Friday night, come along, I get all shined up, and it was 25 cents, I think it was, to go to the movies, or 30 I guess it was. And I went over and called on her. She lived over in Washburn Street, over across the river. Had to go over the footbridge and so forth. I kind of felt foolish walking down with her a little bit, across the bridge and all that sort of thing. And we come down to the theater, and they'd increased the price. Well, I just had 60 cents with me, and I didn't have the extra dime. So, kind of embarrassing. I said, now, if you, I haven't got quite enough money here. You want to wait here just for me for a minute, and I'm going to run down to the drugstore, and I'll see Bill and borrow a dime from him. Well, I went down and got the money from Bill and come back, and we attended the movie, I guess. But I remember that little episode, and I imagine she does too. It's a funny thing. She went on to Colby College. I never did see her much after that, a few times, I guess. But we was down to Florida here not too long ago, a winter or two ago, and a chap that I know by the name of Paul Davenport was down there, and he apparently kept in touch with her. And come to find out, she was in Port Richey. And Paul told me about that and told me, asked me if I'd give her a call. I went down the telephone and called her up there and had a chat. And I hadn't heard from her for, I guess, 50 years, or that's somewheres in that figure. So we had quite a telephone conversation. I haven't heard from her since. Well, anyway, we graduated from high school, and I was 18 years old. and 19 in about 3 more weeks. So it took me 19 years to get through the first 12 grades anyway. And I went on to college, and I enjoyed that quite well, but I didn't do quite so good. I had a lot of problems down there, and one of the biggest ones was my roommate. Well, I lived up in the Hannibal Hamlin Hall on the 4th floor, and the roommate that I had was Dana McNally. There was really 4 of us in there, and Dana was quite a devil, and between the 2 of us, why, sometimes the studying didn't get done. I always remember snowball time coming along, and I get out the window on that top floor, 4 floors up, and that nice icy snowball, and I see a fella sneaking around the bottom, and I let drive with that snowball, and it hit him right in top of the head and knocked him out. Oh dear, that was terrible. And we used to do a few other things and so forth, and then we got the bright idea. We didn't have quite enough money. We'd sell some hot dogs. All the fellows liked to eat hot dogs, you know, and have a little lunch while they were studying. And by George, you know, that was a darn good business. It went over. But it took a lot of time. I had to go into Bangor on the trolley. The electric cars run between Orono and Bangor at that time. And I bought the hot dogs in there. I don't know why I had to go clear to Bangor to buy those hot dogs. Seems like I ought to have been able to buy them in Orono. But anyway, that's the way it was. And we got around 8 or 9 to the pound. We sold them for 10 cents apiece. We made a pretty good profit. We had a whole string of people coming up 4 flights of stairs. They had to walk up 4 flights of stairs to get to our room and sell these hot dogs. We got a little gasoline stove and put a little drum on there that was had water in it and would steam the hot dogs and steam the rolls at the same time. Well, you'd sit out there in the hall with a book in your hand to study, and by George, the money started rolling in, and you know, kind of study and get on the sidelines there for a little bit. But we were taking chemistry, we were taking analytical geometry, and algebra, and the English, of course, and also chemistry and physics. So we had a pretty good schedule. I got by them all, but English. I didn't get by English, and I didn't have a chance to make up that French either. But anyway, McNally, he got diphtheria. Well, let me see now. Was it scarlet fever? He got scarlet fever. That's what it was. Well, they had a quarantine me. When he came down with that and they diagnosed it, they took me down, took me into the old little house there they had for people that was sick and one thing or other. And I had to stay in there for, I think, almost 3 weeks. Well, I never got to class then. Of course, they brought my lessons and all that sort of stuff. And the nurse used to come to see me each day and see how I was making out and so forth. And I got kind of friendly with her. And she had a nice little Chevrolet car, a little coupe there. And when I get out, why, we used to drive around a little bit. But I decided that I guess I didn't want to go on to college. I was still thinking about flying all the time, you know. And McNally and I took some airplane rides when I was down there. There was an airplane come in north of the campus there, and we went up there and had some rides and so forth. So when summer came, I went back working for the Holton Water Company, and I worked all that summer as a lineman, and also that winter, all winter long, because I didn't come back to school. And the following summer, and let me see, in February, yeah, I talked with the father, of course, about going to Dallas Aviation School down in Texas, Lovefield, Texas, and made arrangements to get in there and so forth. So I worked up until February, and a water company, and then I left and went down to the aviation school. And that's a whole trip in itself. The time I get on the train and get down there, I think it was 4 or 5 days going down there. I get lots of letters in here that Bill wrote to me, that my mother wrote, that I wrote to them, and so forth. And it certainly is a history to read those things. But we'll continue on in a little more here. I'm going to end this just for now. So, as I say, we made all the arrangements for transportation and travel down to Dallas, Texas via the train and the railroad and so forth. And I had a string of tickets there about 1.5 yards long. You had different tickets, and every time you changed trains and so forth. And the route that we took was down through Boston and out to Chicago, down to St. Louis, and I think through Oklahoma and into Dallas. So, as I say, we left there about February the 20th. I don't know the exact date, but it's pretty close to that. And it was a Wednesday night. We took the 6 o'clock train out. It was a cold winter night, and the old steam was rising from the engine and from the cars and so forth. When we got there, I had my trunk packed and valise and so forth. And of course, we took a Pullman so that we could sleep. And Father and Ellery Wilson and Oral McNutt, Boob as we called him, come over to see me off. And I get on the train there at about around 6 o'clock and get into the car that I was supposed to travel in, the Pullman car. Got straightened around, and I could look out through the window by scraping off a little frost and steam and so forth, and I see Father and Ellery on one side of him and Boob McNutt on the other as we started pulling out of the station, and they waved their hands, and I waved too, and by golly, I was on my way. So that was a send-off that I got there from Holton anyway. And we went through to Boston, get into Boston early morning. I would judge, must have been around 5 o'clock probably. So I get up, and I had breakfast there. I think I could eat breakfast on the train, but I'm not quite sure of that, because I had to be transferred from North Station to South Station. I had no idea where South Station was in reference to North. But anyway, I went out, big as Billy be damned, and got a taxi, you know, and told the fellow that I had to get down to South Station by such and such a time. And I think he traveled all around the city of Boston before we got there. As later on, I realized all we had to do was travel down Atlantic Avenue, then we'd be there. So we got onto the Boston Albany, I think it was, on the South Station, and pulled out there sometime during the mid-morning or just before dinner. So we rode through Albany, of course, keeping ourselves busy reading magazines and so forth until we got to Buffalo. Well, I'll tell you, Buffalo was impressive to me because, you know, when Mother, while I was growing up, she always had a larking club. And that consisted of getting orders and from people around the town and sending the order into Larkin, and then all these items that they ordered and so forth would come home, and she had to deliver them. But I delivered quite a bit of them. And I was interested in Larkin Company because it was located in Buffalo, New York, and I could see the sign on the building as we drove by. And I was quite impressed that I got a chance to see Buffalo, New York, where Larkin Company was. Mother bought a lot of her furniture from Larkin Company. She got prizes, of course, on her clubs and so forth. She bought the piano, I know, and she bought the hutch and dining room set, and there was numerous things that she purchased that way, which, of course, was a great help to Father. Well, of course, it come time for dinner being served on the dining car. I well remember this, and the chap come through the dining car sounding a little bell or gong and saying dinner's served back in the car. We probably had on about 14 cars on that train. That was impressive to me also. So I get up and walk back to the dining car. This gentleman was standing there, and he walked down in front of me and pulled out a chair. And, of course, he was a steward. And I didn't know that at the time, and I thought he was somebody that was going to keep me company at the table. And I said, fine, sit down. And I walked over to the other side of the chair and pulled out my chair and sit down. But come to find out, he was just ushering me down there to the table. So you can see, boy, we were pretty green from the country, I'd tell you. Well, anyway, we went Anyway, we went on down through there, and I had an upper berth, and I'll tell you, from driving from, riding on the train from, well, I don't know, below Chicago down through St. Louis, it was all one night, and it seemed to me there was a crossing every 5 minutes. That old whistle blew and blew and blew, and bangity-bang-bang, bangity-bang-bang, those steel wheels clicking over the rails kept me awake quite a long while. But anyway, we kept going, and finally arrived in Dallas, and I think it was Saturday around 11 o'clock. And to get into the station, there was a chap there to meet us, of course, and there was 2 or 3 other boys that was also being met. They loaded our trunk and so forth onto the beach wagon, and it was around 4 or 5 miles, I guess, out to Love Field in Dallas at the airport. So when we got there, we unloaded, and they showed me the building that we was going to live in. It was a little small attachment to the side of a hangar. It wasn't very large, and my room was pretty small with a bunk above and a bunk below, bunk beds, I guess you'd call it. And the only thing for heat was a little gas stove in there, like you light with natural gas. That's what it was, just a little stove there. And you know, it gets pretty darn chilly in Texas. I didn't realize that until we get down there that time of year, and boy, there was quite often we had that little gas stove going there. And now let me see. Yeah, the next morning, why, of course, we got acquainted with the situation there, and we had our breakfast over on across the road into a little diner, and they issued us a meal ticket. Of course, I was going to work for my meal and part of my board, which I did, and cut down on the cost considerably. I don't know just exactly what that cost to get down there, but I think it was very close to $1,000, and that included the flying for 50 hours and boarding room and the excess and everything else that goes along with it there, except, of course, we were going to work, which we did. And our work consisted of rolling the airplanes out the first thing in the morning. About 6 o'clock we'd get up, and they had seven fleets with both Warner and Kinner engines in them. And they had one TP Swallow. That was a biplane with an OX-5 in it. And its license number was NC8129, I think. And I think the Kinner fleet that I soloed in was 9428. But yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. And they had one cabin Stinson. They also had a Challenger fledgling, and that was a biplane also. And they had a Rearwind Sportster. Now that was quite an aircraft, and that was owned by Gene Lorene. And Gene was the secretary for the Dallas Aviation School. They also had 2 Ford trimotors. Well, we used to get the aircraft ready in the morning, get them all started, gassed up, oil and so forth, and then we'd clean the hangars at night. In a lot of part of the afternoon, we'd start and clean those hangars all up and roll the airplanes back into the hangars and store them, of course, for night. So that consisted of the part-time work that we were to do. And on Sunday, we sold tickets. I didn't sell any, except on one occasion, because I wasn't too fond of working on Sunday at that time. I didn't quite believe in it, and I refrained from that. But there used to be some tremendous crowds come out there on Sunday to take aircraft rides in those Ford trimotors, and also in the Stinson and in the Gene Lorene's the Rearwind Sportster. So that was the situation there. We did have a radio course that we took while we were there, and got our radio telephone license at that time. So we ate across the street, and by golly, it was good food. There was beans, and I used to put a lot of ketchup on it, and of course they used to have a lot of Mexican food and so forth, and got along very, very nice. Well, a few of us would go in town once in a while. There's one time that I used to go into some dances down there and rent a car, and also we'd go in on the bus. Of course, I didn't know anything about the Negroes or the blacks riding in the back of the bus at that particular time, and it was all new to me. So when I get on the bus, I walk right back with the black boys and sit right down, and I'm telling you, they look pretty rank at me. And I got the idea very quickly anyway, and moved on up to the front of the bus. I used to go to church, to the First Baptist Church there on Sunday. Take the bus in and take the bus back out. And it was a huge church. I think it held about 3,000 people. And we enjoyed the service and so forth. So we went along, started our flying lessons, of course, with an instructor by the name of Lowry. And he was a tough guy, too. And I had 7 hours and 8 minutes when I soloed. And that was on the 15th of March in 1932, yeah? That's according to my logbook. And we went along and got our private test, and that included spins, and that was in April. Had 26 hours when I got my private. And then I got the limited commercial license on the 25th of April. And I had 50 hours and 12 minutes. And that limited commercial license allowed you to carry passengers within a 50-mile radius of a based field. So that meant that if I come back to Halton, I could carry passengers from a particular field. But I couldn't fly cross-country for hire with passengers. I could carry passengers not for hire, of course. So we kind of finished our training there, and I might say before I soloed, I knew the instructor was going to solo me. Just from the way he said, I'd been doing pretty good, making some pretty smooth landings. Well, I kind of lost my nerve, I guess. I prayed to the good Lord that I'd be do all right, and made a few promises. One of them was, well, if I get home and don't have any accidents or problems or anything, I'm going to join the Free Baptist Church and get baptized. Something that I did accomplish later during the year of 32. I think it was probably August that we did that. But anyway, we were going to, I kind of figured that he was going to let me solo, and I didn't want to solo that day. So I made purposely some bum landings. So he'd get out rather disgusted and said, okay, we'll let her go until tomorrow. Well, of course, I thought about this a little bit, and I said, my soul, I got to take the bull by the horns there and have a little flight. So I got my courage up anyway the next morning when he come along, and we went up there, and I did okay, and I soloed. And he asked me to land right where are you standing. He says, you land right here. Well, that's exactly what I did. And it was a great big field. There was no runways, of course. And I could see him standing there, and I aimed that airplane right smack for him, see? Right smack for him. And I come in there, and he started walking away. And pretty soon he was walking a little faster, and then he was running and keeping looking over his shoulder, and he finally got the pitch that he should run sideways and not away from me. So he turned around. He started running 90 degrees from me, and I landed right about where he was standing. So I don't think that he ever did that again to anybody, or told him to land right where he was anyway. Well, after I finished my flying down there, incidentally, I flew the Stinson down there too, on a cross-country course, and I also flew that TP Swallow with the old OX5 in there. I get them an hour and 46 minutes behind the OX5 as a solo. And there was one time that we took the two Ford Tri-Motors and flew from Dallas over to Shreveport one Sunday morning, and sold tickets for the people to take rides. And that Sunday I did sell tickets. And I had a very fine time riding that old Tri-Motor. Of course, we was all sitting in back with those basket seats that they had. I think it only carried, what was it, 12 or 14, something of that nature. And they vibrated the engines back and forth, and we get into the clouds. Well, they went up a little bit and get on top of some low scud, and then they decided they'd get back down underneath it. So we was up and down. It was great to look out, but I didn't realize the danger right then until some time later when I was taking an instrument course. But that was one little incident anyway. And I did talk with Father on the telephone after I finished taking my limited commercial course, and asked him what he thought about purchasing an aircraft and so forth. Well, he didn't think too much of it, and he thought it was quite dangerous with the limited time that I had to try to buy something down there and fly it home. And thanks be to the good Lord and the Lord Almighty himself, because had I done it, I don't know whether I'd ever get back there with 50 hours or not, as things worked out. So we was kind of anxious and to get home, of course. And since I wasn't going to have an airplane, why, I figured that it would be a good way to buy a car and go home that way instead of spending the money on the railroad. So I went down to the used car dealers down there and walked around and spotted one Pontiac coupe, and it was all licensed, and it was $35. And by gosh, I thought that was really something. I took it and drove it around the block. And seemed pretty good, you know. I didn't really examine it too much, and decided to buy it anyway, and the fella sold it to me, and I paid him the $35, and I went back to the airfield, and I had my trunk all packed and the suitcase packed and so forth, and I loaded them right into that car, and I think it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 or 4 o'clock, somewhere there, and I struck out for Oklahoma, going right straight north. Well, it come about 6, 7 o'clock, and it was a little cool. Sun going down, one thing or other, and I was going to have to get a place to stay. Well, I hadn't tried to roll up my window on the left-hand side, but I give it a roll, a twist, and the cranked all right, and all it was a little arm come up. There wasn't any glass in it. So what do you think of that? I thought, my gosh, here I haven't got any glass. And just about that time, the old car, she stalled, and she wouldn't go any further. Well, there I was out in the middle of the boondocks, I didn't know where, and the darn car was stopped. So I knew that it was the way it stopped and everything was a lack of gas. And at that time, those cars had a vacuum tank on it, and that sucked the gas up from the tank into the vacuum tank, and then it run from there down into the carburetor under gravity feed. And I seen that they'd had trouble before. I found a pump in the back, and I had a little wrench that come with the car there, and I took the gas line off, and I couldn't get anything coming through there. So I took the pump and hitched it on the gas line, give it a big pump, and that blew the line free back into the tank. Well, I got a little bit more gas, and I could go about, probably 5 or 10 miles, and the darn thing would stop again. So I'd have to get out and do that all over again. Well, finally I come to an overnight camp. It was probably 7:30, 8 o'clock then, and it was getting pretty dark, if it wasn't dark, and I get in there, the overnight camp. I had to bring my trunk in with the camp with me every night because I was afraid somebody'd steal it. You couldn't lock the car or anything, you know. And I had all my things in there, and I didn't want to lose them, so I had to lift the trunk out of the back end of that coupe and bring it in and sleep. Well, I get into some awful places coming northbound. I get into a place, by golly, that had bed bugs. And there was bed bugs everywhere on the ceiling, and they drop down in your neck and crawl down inside of your collar. Well, I stood that for a little while, and around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on this particular occasion, I get up and get out of there. And that was one of those instances going along. But I had a problem. It seems like somebody had lost the cap of the gasoline tank, and they'd put newspaper in for the gas can. Well, this newspaper, of course, would slosh around and get wet, and then it would come up and plug the line up, coming into the vacuum tank and into the carburetor, and I couldn't go. So I had that problem. All the way home, really. I got it pretty well licked after a while. I drained it in the back of the tank and so forth, and have to stop and work at that. Well, of course, this old car had wooden wheels, and they were so loose that a good many times when I pulled into the filling station to get gasoline, I would have to take the water and soak those wooden wheels so to keep them swelled up, afraid they wouldn't crack and break off, you know. And tires, I had 13 flat tires. I think I was 8 days coming home. And I had 13 flat tires. The brakes wasn't any good on this thing. Just barely had enough brakes to stop. And when I get into a city or into traffic, I had to watch the traffic light and take my time so that I could strike the ball green or have plenty of time to stop. I remember doing that through Pittsburgh, and I was pretty much on edge too. But anyway, there was a lot of hitchhikers going on at that time of the road, and I never heard about anybody being robbed or anything of that nature, and I picked up quite a few. I had company quite a bit of the way, off and on. I never had any problem. But I did have to buy a few used tires, and I think they were around $2 or $2.50, something of that nature. Of course, you could get 8 gallons of gas for $1 then, and that was a help. And this thing probably run about 20 miles on a gallon. I remember picking up one fella just before we get into West Virginia, and he said that I could come and stay at his house. Well, we get into his house, and it was way back in the boondocks, and it looked like one of these hillbilly places. And his mother was dressed up in these old-fashioned clothes with a black skirt on and a white apron, and it went clear to the floor, and she had her hair all done up tight behind her and hung down over her back and so forth. And they offered me some wine to drink. Well, of course, being that I had no use for that sort of stuff, so I didn't accept that. And I felt pretty uncomfortable in that house because they all looked at me and they didn't say yes or no. And I went up and went into bed anyway. And you know, I got to thinking. I woke up about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I didn't like that place for bed. So I get up, put on my clothes, went down, get in the car, and left. So that's the last I see of that fella anyway. Well, I get into around Mother's Day, the 10th, 11th, or 12th of May, somewhere along in there, I got to Springfield, Massachusetts. And I called Mother up on the telephone, and she was happy as the dickens to hear that I was down in Massachusetts. She thought I was practically home, she told me later. And that was a good Mother's Day present from her, for her anyway. Well, from Springfield to Halton, it took me 2 days. They was just building the Worcester Turnpike at that time, between Worcester and Boston, and there was all kinds of detours, and it was rough, and I don't think I averaged more than 20, 25 miles an hour. I didn't go that fast anyway. But we arrived home eventually. Well, in between that, I got to Waterville, up around Waterville. It took me a whole day to travel from Springfield to Waterville, Maine. It took me a whole day from Waterville to Halton. And I got home somewhere around the 13th, 12th or 13th of May. And, of course, it was Jimmy Colton and the chap by the name of Bill Stanislaw were flying in Halton. They were flying in Halton when I left to go to Texas. Father, of course, thought that I should go up there and take my flying lessons from them. But I didn't want to do that in my hometown from them, and I thought that I would get better education and see and have better experience down in Love Field in Dallas, which was true. But anyway, these Jim Colton and Bill Stanis were flying out of the Ketchum Farm. Now that's on the North Road. And they were flying a Waco OX-5 NC-1180. And I got a little bit of dual time in that. I didn't solo that airplane, but I did get some dual time after I got home and talked with Jim and so forth. And in talking with Father, I decided that probably it might be a pretty good idea to get an airplane. And he was somewhat interested in it too. So on June the 9th in 1932, we took the train again and went down to Boston, out to the old airport, which was nothing but a cinder, all cinders then, no runways or anything else, the old Boston Airport, East Boston Airport, and started looking around to see what we could find for an airplane to buy. I went into Ames Skyways. Crocker Snow run that at that time. And they had a J4 Waco there that was a pretty nice aircraft.